Imagine if they have a policy of calculating the amount of calories that the average Palestinian in Gaza can have without a full-blown starvation crisis, but they can still have the power to put Palestinians in Gaza on a diet, which also was the term of Doug Weisglass, an advisor to Sharon. That's an occupying power. And so occupiers don't have rights, they have obligations. And so accordingly, they don't have the right to fire a single bullet into Gaza. They had the right to self-defense on October 7th.
Within Israel.
Within Israel, as Hamas, of course, just because Israel is an occupier, it doesn't mean they have to let Hamas kill their people. Okay, fair enough. But it's not October 7th anymore. We're now as we're recording this, more than 3 months later. And what Israel is doing has nothing to do with self-defense. It's just the latest phase of its decades-old project to wipe out Palestinian self-determination.
But the argument would be that the Allies, the Americans, the British, the French, the Russians, and the other side didn't stop at the borders of Germany. Once they've expelled Germans from the countries they occupied, they went in there to destroy that murderous regime, and they had to.
Right.
So this is the argument that Israel would make: is that fine, we protected ourselves on October the 7th, but now we have to go in there and get rid of these murderers so they don't do it again.
Okay, but you cannot possibly draw a comparison between the Nazis, which is a hegemonic exterminationist state, and Hamas, which was founded in response to an occupation. It only was founded in the late 80s. It was founded in refugee camps.
Yeah.
Its founders, if you look at their family histories, it's really instructive. All the founders of Hamas have family histories that tie into the Nakba and the massacres and the expulsions.
Well, you know what? In 1956, the Israeli army massacred some men and boys in Gaza when it occupied. Israel attacked Egypt, as you know, and Egypt was in control of Gaza Strip at that time. And Israel occupied the Gaza, and they massacred hundreds of Arab Palestinian men and boys, unarmed. They called them out of their houses, they killed them, and bodies were in the streets for days because of a curfew. They couldn't even bury the bodies. An 8-year-old boy watched his uncle being killed. He became one of the funders of Hamas.
There we go.
Later,
Isn't that right around the time that Moshe Dayan at the funeral of an Israeli soldier?
I wanted to read that quote.
Yeah.
So Moshe Dayan, a famed Israeli military leader, he speaking at a funeral in 1956 for a soldier who was killed by Palestinians from Gaza, and he said this: "Let us not cast the blame on the murderers today. Why should we deplore their burning hatred for us? For 8 years they have been sitting in the refugee camps in Gaza, and before their eyes we've been transforming the lands and villages where they and their fathers dwelt into our estate." And he goes on with more. And he wasn't saying this to sympathize with the Palestinians of Gaza. The thrust of his message is, given that they are responding to us stealing their land, we have to respond with even more force. We should not be intimidated because these are determined people.
But at least we're not going to cry victim.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and the word that cries out to me in that quote is for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
That was 1956.
Yeah.
The last 8 years.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to the year 2024.
Yeah, we're almost 80 years.
We're almost at 80 years.
Yeah. In 2005, there was a study in World Journal of Psychiatry, some journal like that.
2005, mind you.
2005. This is before Hamas gained power in Gaza. And they looked at the war traumatized populations around the world. They said the most traumatized children in the world were in Gaza. This is 2005.
And in 2004, Giora Eiland called it a big concentration camp.
And who was Giora Eiland?
One of the heads of Israeli security.
Okay. Now, so those kids that were studied were adolescents or young kids in 2005. Guess who those young people were that streamed into Israel on October the 7th? Again, we're not justifying anything. But those Hamas fighters that moved into Israel on October the 7th, most of them went knowing that they're going to die.
And they had never left.
You know,
they had never left.
They'd never been outside. No, they were not allowed to leave. You know,
that's the point.
So the point is, they were traumatized kids in 2005. Then I grew up in this place that I know concentration camp is a three-year word for a lot of people because we're not talking about death camps. We're talking about concentration camps where the Nazis would hold their prisoners.
Well, and many other countries have held. It's not, concentration camp is not a Nazi phenomenon.
Yeah. So they were traumatized already in 2005. They lived the next 18 years in this, what's been called the world's largest concentration camp by Israelis. What drives them to that level of desperation, despair, and willing to die and willing to kill? It wasn't self-generated. And then people try to explain this, that this is jihad, this is the Muslim hatred for the non-Muslim, or specifically the jihadist hatred for the Jews.
They teach their children to hate.
They teach their children
in their mother's milk.
Well, these are the people that did it. And let's remind ourselves, there was no Hamas 40 years ago.
And who encouraged their growth?
And not to mention then, if you look at the history of it, all the ways that Israel encouraged, as I already quoted, very deliberately, the growth and Hamas as a counterweight to the secular PLO.
Secular moderate PLO.
So that they wouldn't have to have peace agreements, because now there's nobody to negotiate with. So that's, again, even if it keeps saying this, even without justifying anything, these people didn't grow out of trees.
Yeah.
They didn't spring out of the ground all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They're not the spawn of some kind of miserable anti-Jewish hatred. They came out of a history. But put yourself in that situation, in their situation. If that state represented for you your expulsion from your homeland, the deprivation of your goods, the refusal of letting you go back, your incarceration in a small piece of the earth from where you're not even allowed to leave, constant bombardments, multiple times when your airplanes come and bomb us and kill our children, thousands of them over the years. This is not a new phenomenon. And if this is what the Jews are, and this is what is done in the name of the Jews, by the Jewish state,
with the Jewish star flying on the
Jewish
flag.
star on the flag and on the tanks, if when you demonstrate peacefully, they still kill you,
as they did in 2018,
as they did in 2019, if, as the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported, your snipers have a contest as to who can shatter more Palestinian knees of people who are demonstrating peacefully. And if this is all being done in the name of the Jews, I'm putting that in quotation marks, and if most of the Jewish organizations around the world support this and justify this, how are you supposed to feel about the Jews and the Jewish state? Might you perhaps harbor a lot of hatred? Might you have thoughts of revenge? Might you?